Okay, yesterday we finished up with adding and subtracting rational numbers. Now we're going to work on the next part of our unit where we're actually multiplying and dividing rational numbers. So what we're going to do first is we're going to do a review, and we're just going to review the rules for multiplying and dividing numbers when they are positive and negative whole numbers, which we know are the set of integers. So in this case, we have the number negative 24 times 17. And I'm asking you to solve this problem. So how would you go about solving this problem? Well, we can simply just take the number 24 and multiply it times 17. And 7 times 4 is 28. Carry the 2. 7 times 2 is 14 plus 2 is 16. Then we put a placeholder here, because now I'm moving over to the tens place value. So I want to push this number over one place value. So 1 times 4 is 4, and 1 times 2 is 2. So we have 8. 6 plus 4 is 10. Carry the 1, and that gives me 408. But how do we keep track of the sign of my answer? Do we know if the sign's positive or negative? So we'll come back to that. Now I'm going to tell you that the answer is negative. So what about dividing with positive and negative numbers? Well, we can just look at them like whole numbers, and we're going to say 36 divided by 9, and what does that equal? So 9 goes into 36 4 times. 4 times 9 is 36, so we subtract that group, that 4 groups of 9, we subtract that, and that leaves us with 0, so now we know we're done. So we know our answer is 4, but this was negative and this was positive. So is my final answer positive or negative? Again, I'm going to tell you that it's negative, but we need to figure out how we keep track of the sign when we multiply and divide with positive and negative numbers. So last year you may have learned different techniques. We have one where you called it Sleepy Mouse, and you said negative, negative, and then positive. And then there's also the triangle routine where you can put your negative in each corner, the bottom corners, and then you put a plus sign in the top. Or you could do this. You can do a tic-tac-toe board, and you can put a plus here, a plus here, and a plus here. So you put plus signs in the diagonals, and then you put subtract signs everywhere else. Now, all three of these help me to know that these rules apply to multiplying and dividing only. So what we do is we can use this by saying a negative times a negative equals a positive answer. We could also say a positive times a negative equals a negative answer. So you can see how the Mickey Mouse head can work for us in this case. And remember, this is multiplying and dividing. Okay, if you want to think of mouse beginning with M and multiplying beginning with M, that might help you remember that this is for multiplication. Now for this one, same thing. A positive times a negative equals a negative. And we can do it across any column or any row, and it's going to give us the correct answer. We could say a negative times a positive gives me a negative, and I have to come straight across the row. What about coming straight down? I can say a positive times a negative equals a negative. So this is just another memory device for you to use, a tic-tac-toe board, whichever one you prefer. And then a third method would be the triangle. You put the negative signs, you put two negative signs down in the bottom of the triangle and your positive sign up here. And then you read it in any direction you want around the corners of the triangle. So we say a negative times a positive equals a negative. Well, what if we had a positive times a negative? Well, that answer would be negative. So this is referring to the signs of your final answer, but you're going to have to do the calculations on the actual whole numbers. Now, one of the good things about this is this can be used for both multiplying and dividing. We only have to know one chart. So we can use this for both multiply and divide. Okay, all three of these are the same thing, they just look different, and we can use them for both multiplying and dividing to help us find the sign of our final answer. Okay, so we can use this for both multiplying and dividing. You can pick any one of these. You don't have to use all of them. Just pick your favorite one, and they do the same thing. They help you determine the sign of your final answer. Okay, so it is good news because all of those diagrams, all of those charts, all of those pictures can be used to find the sign of the final answer for both multiplying and dividing. Okay, so as long as you know how to multiply and divide, all we have to do is perform the operation and then go back and figure out what the sign is of our final answer. So for example, what if I had a problem that looked like this? What if I had, let's see, what if I had -4 times -3? Okay, the rule would be to just ignore all the positive and negative signs. Okay, we're not gonna worry about the signs until the end when we come up with our final solution. So we ignore all the signs, pretend like they are not there, and we're just going to multiply or divide using the absolute values only. So we're just using the number, not the negative part. Forget the negative signs, forget the multiplication. So we're going to say 4 times 3, and that equals 12. Okay? Now you're going to use one of the diagrams above, and you're going to figure out the sign of your final answer. So these are the rules, but I prefer to use the, let's say, the triangle. So let's make a triangle here. And we're going to say negative, negative, and then positive. So I look up here and I see that I have a negative times a negative. So I come down to my triangle. A negative times a negative means my answer has to be positive. So for -4 times -3, my answer would be positive 12. And it's the same thing for division. What if I said, what is 12 divided by -4? We forget all of the signs. The division sign, I'm sorry, the negative sign, and then we divide. So what is 12 divided by 4? 4 goes into 12 3 times. But is the answer positive or negative? Well, let's go back to the signs of our two quotients. We have positive 12 and we have negative 4. So we come over to whatever diagram you want to use. So for instance, let's use the tic-tac-toe board this time so you can see that it works this way every time. So this is plus, this is plus, this is plus, everything else is minus. So we're going to say over here, we have a positive 12 divided by a negative 4. So we have a positive divided by a negative. That means my answer has to be negative. Sorry about that. Okay, so when we have a positive divided by a negative, so we say a positive divided by a negative, that means my answer has to be negative. So 12 divided by negative 4 equals, oops, sorry about that. Negative 3. Okay, now this should just be a review. So let's look at some more problems and get some practice. So for our guided practice, what we should do is we should write down one of our memory devices. So again, if you like to use Sleepy Mouse, you can. I prefer to use the triangle just because it's a little easier to draw. And then we have a plus sign in the top, a negative sign in the bottom, and a negative sign in the bottom. So now we look at our problem. So this is just really 13 times 15. Ignore the positive and negative signs and just multiply. So we're going to say 13 times 15. And 3 times 5 is 15. And we're going to carry the 1. 5 times 1 is 5 plus 1 is 6. I'm going to put a placeholder because I'm scooching over to the 10th place value. So I have to put a 0 there and move over to the 10th place value. The 1 is in the 10th place value. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 1 is 1. And now I'm going to add all that together. So 5 plus 0 is 5. 6 plus 3 is 9. And 1 comes down. So the answer is 195. But what is the sign of my final answer? Well, we got to go back to our diagram, and we have a negative times a positive. So we have a negative times a positive means the answer has to be negative. So for this problem, the answer will be negative 195. Okay, so let's come over here and let's look at this. We're going to say negative 11 times negative 23. Forget about the signs. So just ignore these negative signs. We're going to say 11 times 23. And what does that equal? 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 1 is 3. I'm scooching over to the 10th place value, so I have to put a placeholder. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 1 is 2. I add those together. 3 plus 0 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. And 2 comes down. So my answer will be 253. But what is the sign of my final answer? We have to go back up to our diagram. Here we have a negative times a negative. So we're going to say negative times a negative equals a positive. So my answer would be positive 253. and 53. So let's look at a couple more problems. Okay, we have 38 divided by negative 19. So we ignore the signs. Now notice this problem is division. So we're going to say 38 divided by 19. So we're going to say, how many times does 19 go into 38? Ignore the signs. We're going to make sure we get the signs straightened out at the very end. So we know, let's see, what's 19 times 2? Because I'm not sure what that is. So 19 times 2, 2 times 9 would be 18, carry the 1, 2, 3. Oh, looky there. So the answer would be 2. But is my answer positive or negative? Well, let's look up here. We have a positive divided by a negative. So if we use our memory device, I'm going to use the triangle, negative, negative, positive. We have a positive divided by a negative. Positive divided by negative gives me a negative answer. So my answer would be negative 2. Okay. So now let's look at this. The price of jeans was reduced $6 each week for 7 weeks. How much did the price of the jeans drop during this time? So this will be a multiplication problem because we have 1 week and what? The price went down $6. We have another week and the price went down $6. And then we have another week, so that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total weeks. And each time the price went down what? $6. So that would be negative 6, because if it goes down, it's negative. So that means we have negative 6, 7 times. So we would just do 6 times 7. 6 times 7 equals 42, but now we want to check the sign of our final answer. A negative times a positive equals what sign in the final answer? A negative times a positive equals a negative. So my answer would have to be negative 42. So the price of the jeans went down $42. Okay, now let's look at this one. This is another division problem. It says 125 divided by negative 25. So we're going to say 125 divided by 25. So does 25 go into 1? Nope. Does 25 go into 12? Nope. So we got to go over all the way to 125. So think about quarters and dollars. We know that there's 4 quarters in the dollar. So that means we have 100 because 25 times 4 would be 100 pennies. So that would be 100, but if we add 25 more, so that would be 4, and then we're going to add 25 more, so that would be 25 times 5. So 5 times 25 equals 125. 5 times 25 will be 125. We subtract that out. That leaves us with 0. But is the answer positive or negative? So we want to go back up to our little diagram, and we have a positive divided by a negative. A positive divided by a negative gives me a negative. So my answer has to be negative 5. So the answer would be negative 5, and you do a big circle around it to let me know. Okay, so a rope is 38 inches long. Miss Scissor needs to cut the rope into 4-inch pieces. How many pieces will she be able to cut from the rope? Okay, so if I have this big long piece of rope, okay? Got this big long piece of rope, and she wants to cut it into 4-inch pieces. So each one of these is 4 inches. So we're dividing the larger piece into how many smaller pieces, which measure 4 inches. So this problem becomes 38 divided by 4. We have 38 inches total in the rope. Each piece is 4 inches long. So if we divide it by 4, that's going to tell us how many total pieces she can get from the rope. So 38 divided by 4. So 4 goes into 3. Nope. 4 goes into 38. So how many times does 4 go into 38? Well, I know 4 times 9 is 36. So 9 times 4 would be 36. So I'm going to subtract 36 from 38, and that leaves me with 2. Now remember from what we learned yesterday, we need to take the remainder of 2 and put it over 4. So we have, so we have the remainder of 2 over the divisor, what's up out front, over 4. Now 2 over 4, that's easy because 2 over 4, 2 is half of 4. So my answer would be 9/2, and I come up here and I see that this is positive and positive. So that's just normal math. And we know that the answer has to be positive because we don't have any negative signs. Okay, so this is all just a review, and this is what you need to do for your homework. So when you do your homework, on a separate piece of paper, you need to draw whatever diagram you want to use to keep track of the answer, the sign of the answers. So if you want to use the Mickey Mouse, you can do your mouse with your ears. And we know that this is for multiply and divide. M for mouse is multiply. And then we know we have squinty eye, and then a plus for a mouth. Or we could use our tic-tac-toe board. And this is plus down the diagonal. And then all of these are negative. Or you could use the triangle where you have a negative on the bottom and then a plus sign on the top. So you can use any one of these to keep track of the signs of your final answer, okay? This is what you use to keep track of the sign of your final answers. Now remember, fractions like this are little mini division problems. You take the top dog, which is the number inside, and you put it inside the house. Now remember, when we're multiplying and dividing, ignore the signs until the very end. So top dog would be 14 divided by 2. Now I'm going to let you go ahead and finish the rest of this for your homework. So if you have any questions, send me an email, or you can do a Google Meet with me on the Google Classroom every Monday at about 9:01 until 9:45.